The Golden Touch. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a wealthy and powerful king named Midas. King Midas was known throughout the land for his immense riches. His palace was filled with treasures, golden statues, jeweled crowns, and countless coins stacked high. But despite all his wealth, King Midas was not content. He loved gold more than anything else in the world, and he always wanted more. One day, as King Midas was counting his gold coins, a strange figure appeared before him. This figure was no ordinary visitor. It was a mystical being with a golden glow, who had heard of the king's insatiable desire for wealth. "King Midas," the being said in a voice that echoed like chimes, "you are already one of the wealthiest men in the world, but I can grant you a wish that will make you even richer. What is it that you desire most?" Without hesitation, King Midas replied, "I wish that everything I touch would turn to gold." The being looked at Midas with a knowing expression. "Are you sure this is what you want? Think carefully, for this wish will change your life forever." But King Midas was blinded by his greed, and could only think of the endless wealth that would be his. "Yes," he said firmly, "that is my wish." The mystical being nodded and waved its hand, casting a golden light over the king. "Your wish is granted. From now on, everything you touch will turn to gold." With that, the being disappeared, leaving King Midas alone in his palace, eager to test his new power. He reached out and touched the table in front of him, and immediately, it turned into solid gold. Overjoyed, Midas ran around the room, touching chairs, vases, and curtains, all of which turned into gleaming gold. The king was ecstatic. "I am the richest man in the world," he cried, reveling in the sight of his golden surroundings. The next morning, King Midas awoke, eager to see his daughter, Princess Zoe. She was the light of his life, a sweet and gentle girl who loved her father dearly. Zoe ran into the room, laughing and excited to see her father. "Father, come play with me in the garden," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy. But King Midas was distracted by his newfound power. "In a moment, my dear," he said, reaching out to touch a rose that Zoe had picked for him. As soon as his fingers brushed the delicate petals, the rose turned to solid gold. The Golden Touch. Princess Zoe stared in shock. "Father, what happened to the rose?" Midas, too consumed with his excitement, hardly noticed his daughter's concern. "Isn't it wonderful? Everything I touch turns to gold." But Zoe was not convinced. "But father, the rose is no longer soft or fragrant. It's cold and hard now. I liked it better before." The king brushed off her concerns, believing she would come to appreciate the beauty of gold as he did. "Don't worry, my dear. Gold is the most precious thing in the world." Later that day, King Midas grew hungry and called for a feast. When the servants brought in the food, Midas eagerly reached out to take a bite of bread, but as soon as he touched it, the bread turned to gold. He tried to eat a piece of fruit, but it too turned to gold in his hands. No matter what he touched, all the food transformed into solid gold, leaving him unable to eat or drink. For the first time, a feeling of dread began to creep into the king's heart. He realized that his wish was not the blessing he had imagined it to be. His hunger grew, but he could not satisfy it, and he began to understand the grave mistake he had made. As the day went on, Princess Zoe returned to her father's side, worried about the change she saw in him. "Father, are you all right? You don't look well." Desperate for comfort, King Midas reached out to embrace his daughter, but as soon as he touched her, she too turned to gold. The king gasped in horror, realizing that his beloved daughter had been transformed into a lifeless statue. "No!" Midas cried, falling to his knees beside the golden figure of his daughter. "What have I done? My precious Zoe, please come back to me." Overcome with grief, King Midas called out to the mystical being, begging for the curse to be lifted. "Please, I was wrong. Take back this terrible gift. I would give all the gold in the world to have my daughter back." The being appeared once more, its golden glow soft and comforting. King Midas, it said gently, you have learned a valuable lesson. You wished for something that you believed would bring you happiness, but in doing so, you lost what truly mattered. The golden touch tears streamed down the king's face as he nodded in agreement. Yes, I see that now. Please, I beg you, undo this curse. I no longer desire gold, only the love of my daughter. The being smiled and waved its hand over the king and the golden figure of Zoe. Your wish is granted. From now on, the golden touch will be gone. As the golden light faded, Princess Zoe slowly began to return to her normal self. Her golden hue melted away, and she blinked in confusion as she looked at her father. Father, what happened? She asked, her voice full of concern. King Midas, overcome with relief, embraced his daughter tightly, grateful to have her back. My dear Zoe, I made a terrible mistake, but I promise I will never let my greed come between us again. You are more precious to me than all the gold in the world. From that day forward, King Midas no longer cared for wealth or riches. He learned to value the love of his daughter and the simple joys of life. The story of King Midas and his golden touch spread throughout the kingdom, serving as a reminder to all who heard it that true happiness cannot be found in material wealth, but in the love and connections we share with others. And so, King Midas and Princess Zoe lived happily ever after, surrounded by love, laughter, and the beauty of the world around them, no longer measured by gold, but by the richness of their hearts.